The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame. Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined this week by two awesome co-hosts plus an exciting guest.
Lauren Ash.
Your brother, Shane?
Not my brother.
No, Reagan's
brother. My brother. And joining us this week, we have an exciting guest, and I was trying to figure out a way to do this that didn't sound like a pun, but our guest this week is notable IFComp author and winner of the IFComp 2018, JJ Guest. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And I'm such a fan of your work, but especially 2018's Alias the Magpie, which was such a wonderful game. So I'm really excited to hear your thoughts about the comp this year, and we're going to talk about a handful of games this week, continuing our coverage from previous weeks. So this is a kind of an interesting comp this time around. I wonder if before we start diving into specifics, if anybody wants to sort of talk about their experience with the comp this year generally or anything like that.
I think this year, one of the noticeable things is that although there's a load of great games, there's not one, for me, there's not one clear winner that's really shining out. And so it could kind of go in any number of different directions.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see where the voting goes. I think it's going to depend a lot on people's individual tastes.
I think it's going to go to the Electoral College.
Yes, definitely. Well, it's been a really odd time because we generally at this point, like when everything's been out for a few weeks, we start looking around for games we've missed. And I usually take on this kind of like hunting and gathering phase where I go through and I say, people are really reviewing these 4 games highly. But a lot of more games are getting really good reviews, not 10s, but like 8s. And a lot of games are getting like a bunch of 8s and then a 1. So it seems like there's been a lot of disagreement this year. I think the golden banana of Discord will be competitive. Good but point. It's not as if we're seeing 1 or 2 games where everyone universally says, yes, this is a new canon member. I think it actually makes it a lot more interesting and more valuable for us to all play different games because in the past, it's been like, oh, if I don't play this game everyone says is great, I've missed the comp, like the identifiable entry of the comp this year. And this year, I don't think anyone's going to say 2020 was the year this game got released. I think there's going to be every single person who you talk to is going to pick a different game for that.
That's true. I think it's also like, it's not that there's not a bunch of really high quality games here. It's more just that like I have really enjoyed at least 5 or 6 pretty big games that felt like really nice packages. And, while none of them has necessarily been like, oh, this is the game. I mean, I've got a couple of private thoughts about which games I think are particularly strong this year, but I don't want to share them yet on the podcast. So like, take that for the grain of salt. But, it's definitely been a really interesting year. And I have a couple of games to talk about today that I think are really strong contenders or really, really interesting ones.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be really, one of my things I'd really like to know about is, it may not be the very first time this has happened, but it feels like an event in and of itself. And I think I want to talk about the Magpie Takes the Train with JJ, because I think this is a really interesting event in the comp. Have we seen sequels like this brought into IFComp before? I think we might have seen something with the Dragon Will See You Now or something like that, right?
Yeah, Mathbush has did one for the game was The Owl Consults. He offers as a prize one of the IFComp prizes to write a game in the same world as the game that you've written. So, and I chose that when I won. And The Owl Consults, which I think was by Thomas Mack and one other person, he wrote a sequel to that called The Origin of Modern Time. So it's written in the same universe, but possibly a sequel or a prequel. So I think there's been a few of those, and I think I don't know that I can't think of another one actually at the moment, but The Dragon Will See You Now, I think was another, might be another one. I don't know whether that was written as a prize, but
yeah, it might be I wasn't sure if it was a official sequel or a parody. It was a little unclear with The Dragon.
One of the neat things about following the competition from year to year is you do start to see this sort of little culture develop, and people really putting a lot of effort into pleasing not just the general audience of interactive fiction, but the very specific audience of IFComp fans such as ourselves, which I really enjoy that. I'm particularly curious to hear what your thoughts are on the Magpie's return here in this sequel. What do you think about it?
Oh, I love it. I think it's great. We sort of, Mash Blush and I discussed kind of ideas beforehand, and I actually had sort of an idea for a sequel set in a train, and he kind of took that and ran with it, and pretty much just he consulted me a couple of times. I think sent me versions and said, "Is this got the right feel to it?" And I sent him feedback, and the end result is terrific. I think it's a great game, really fun. And also introduces some great characters into the universe, which I may well reuse in another sequel.
Or I would love to see more sequels to the Magpie.
Yes.
I really liked that game quite a lot, and the world really seemed to sort of lend itself to IF. It was a very, very nice combination of characters and theme and all of that. I quite liked that one. So glad to hear that may continue. Do we want to jump into talking about the games that we played for this week to discuss? I think Shane and Jason, you both played Mother Tongue, right?
Yes.
Very lovely game. I think it's a bit of like an epistolary kind of game. Like we've started to see a lot of these kind of games that are played out in the form of like text messages or a phone. And to me, this is kind of like Duolingo meets like a call from mom. It's a really lovely game where it's created by Nell, Raban, or perhaps Raban. I'm not quite sure. But they're a theater artist and have made like RPGs and also Filipina. So this is a really interesting little little window into Filipino culture. So that's the mother here regrets not teaching you, the player, Tagalog, and is now going to give you some instruction in it over text message. And it's a really lovely little game that kind of serves both as a very, very light introduction to kind of some Tagalog language basics, and to like a little cultural window into a window into family life as well. I think it was really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. It's like a sweet little window into this world, and obviously the mother has been thinking about this for a long time and wanted to teach their child Tagalog, and this is the moment in which the subject was broached, and they started to have a dialogue about it, and it was really lovely to be in that. Actually brought a little tear to my eye playing it.
I haven't played Mother Tongue, but I did play Kanji, and it's really interesting to me that there's like these two little games that are extremely culturally specific and warm and really inviting. I hadn't really seen these specific like Asian experiences told in IF before. And I think it's really notable that this year there's two really good games that are short and sweet like this.
Yeah, that's really cool. And this is also one of those, I mean, I say this a lot when we talk about games in the comp, but like I always feel like these are the kinds of things that you can see in interactive fiction that don't make their way into other types of games. It's really something to get these sort of like personal, like family level experiences with, unique voices and all of that. I think that's just so cool. I haven't played this one. I really, really want to. It's on my short list. So thank you for telling me about it.
It's nice to have a break from the like 37 murder games every once in a while.
Yeah. I do love a good murder mystery, but it's really nice to have these sort of like family stories and things like that.
So is it all through text message? Is it kind of like a Twine thing? Is it like they pop up in real time? What does it feel like actually reading it?
So they pop up in real time, and they have. There's also a little pause as you see the mother typing, which is this is kind of cool. And there's a bit of a taboo in choice-based games at the moment against timed text, where it writes on slowly. That's become a bit of a no-no. But in this case, because you're actually sort of waiting for your mother to respond, it fits into the world, and it makes sense. So without it, I don't think it would have worked quite as well.
I will say for the mother in this that she's a tremendously fast typist.
Yes.
For a mom. Moms, notoriously great texters.
Yes. This Filipina mom is an absolute whiz with her iPhone keyboard.
Good for her. I was going to ask you, though, about that taboo about that you mentioned about timed text. Is that just sort of, is it just sort of passé to have the sort of text type onto the screen like JRPG style, or what is the thinking behind that?
Yeah, it's definitely become passé in the last couple of years. I think there's been a lot of Twine games and things coming into IFComp, and people want to play them, but having timed text and having the slow text on the screen has become a real nuisance, especially if you have a lot of games to get through. And its effectiveness as a device has waned as well because it's been so overused.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And even in sort of more mainstream games where that's actually not terribly uncommon, you started seeing a lot of games add like sliders for text speed and things like that. And I feel like if you can't give that level of customization, so that fast readers, for example, can feel comfortable and not feel like they're lagging behind your game, then it makes sense to kind of do away with it altogether. But I'm definitely glad to hear that it's got the like waiting for a text message, so-and-so is typing kind of thing. Because that definitely feels like a verisimilitude thing for a texting-based game.
It really does work in this game, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it would be really sad if it was like a tap to see the next message. I think we talk a lot about how different authors are controlling pacing of games, whether it's you have to tap to continue, or if it's timed, or if it's just, you hit the link and then you get one word, and you hit the link and you get another word. And I think it's, I have a bit of a soft spot for lost phone games, and I think those are kind of the souped up versions of an interactive fiction game. So
yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Well, that game I think is very realistic and based in the author's actual experience and a very real world situation. And Reagan, I think you have a game that also is similarly based in reality, and it is called Vampire Incorporated.
Yes, thank you for that excellent transition, Shane. Yeah, I played Vampire Incorporated more or less on a whim. I think mostly because I liked the description. I put Vampire Incorporated in the notes here, but it's actually Vampire Limited or LTD. So excuse me, I mixed up the title there.
Well, I think it's very important to note the distinction there, because if you are a limited liability corporation, then your vampiric victims may not be able to sue you directly.
That's a good point. Thank you. Very, very important for the world of the game. And it's actually got a really funny world. I mean, I like vampire stuff. And so, this already had like a thumbs up from me there. But the subtitle below here was a corporate espionage adventure, parentheses, with vampires in it. And so, I was excited about this to play it. And I really, really enjoyed the humor of this game. It's got some really funny writing and a bit of an interesting world. As far as, so it's a parser-based game. It's not the most complicated in terms of puzzles or anything like that, but it does a good job of giving you puzzles that are sort of part of its narrative, that are, all sort of build on the humor of the game. It's really humor focused. So you're playing as Nero Brashov, who is a failed businessman vampire, and you are going to try to get revenge on your former business partner, whose name is Hadrian. I've forgotten his last name. But Hadrian is a sort of an Elon Musk figure in the vampire and also apparently human community. It's a little unclear, what the world of the game and the relationship of vampires to the world is. You get some interesting tidbits and details later in the story. But Hadrian the game begins with Hadrian giving this sort of like pitch to investors about this sort of free energy machine, something that's going to be like a sort of like a cold fusion type of thing, something that turns helium into unlimited energy or something along those lines. And you are a very bitter vampire, and you want to destroy his company, and you're going to do that via corporate espionage. But being a vampire, you have a lot of unique challenges in order to try to take down this Elon Musk-esque vampire figure. So most notably, you can't go on to you have all these limitations as a vampire, all the traditional vampire limitations. And so you, for example, need to be invited onto the corporate campus before you'd be able to go there, because otherwise you can't, you're a vampire. And all of the standard vampire limitations apply. So I think to kind of get across the humor that this is going for, it's easiest to talk about the beginning of the game. You have a job interview, and it's one of the funniest bits of the game. But it's funny throughout, but very, very funny up front. In order to get onto the corporate campus and begin sabotaging this project, you need to obviously be invited on, and the easiest way to do that is with a job interview. So you call up their HR department and you get a job interview where they invite you onto the campus, but you can only go where you've been invited, and so you can only go onto the campus to their HR building where you can get your interview. And then the rest of the game is largely about kind of trying to figure out ways around your vampire limitations in order to get into the places you need to go in order to sabotage things.
That does sound hilarious. I mean, it's just I don't know whether you've seen the TV show and the film What We Do in the Shadows. But
yes,
it sounds as though it's going for that kind of humor.
It's definitely that meets like corporate businessman crap. Like if there were a businessman vampire in that, it would be very appropriate to this.
Are there like synergy jokes? Like what are there like? Is there
it's easiest
humor?
It's easiest if I just give you some examples. I've taken some screenshots here, and forgive me, I have to scan through these a little bit. So at the beginning, you get a typical interview question about like why do you want to work here, and the dialogue in this game is delivered in a very sort of adventure gaming style where you choose from a menu. So, and this is a type of humor in IF that always works for me, is like dialogue option humor. So your choices when they ask you, why do you want to work at Lunar Cell? Your options are corporate espionage, revenge, I've lost control of my life, and it has always been my dream to serve the customer. And the image of this ancient vampire just...
It has always been my dream to serve the customer. Yeah.
To serve customer. Yeah, basically that image of them saying... And, of course, you can choose all of these options. All of them except it's always been my dream to serve the customer actually provide you with background story of why you are here. So if you choose, for example, that you want to get revenge, you get a little flashback sequence of why this vampire wants revenge, and they're all very funny and full of great moments.
I'm just thinking what I would do if I was in an interview with someone and I said, why do you want to work here? And they said revenge. I think I would probably fall in love with them a little bit. Like just the boldness of that.
Yeah, that'd be quite a interview moment. The final question in the interview, which is a great scene, I keep coming back to it, but the final question in the interview was just one more question, and there are no right or wrong answers here. What would you say is your biggest weakness? And of course, your options are vulnerability to sunlight, wooden stake through the heart or stomach, inability to cross thresholds uninvited, sensitivity to holy symbols, running water, and I guess I'm just a perfectionist. And, what I also loved about that, of course, is then, of course, I chose every one of those sort of wrong answers, right? And each of those, again, delivered some backstory on how the vampire feels about this limitation. A big focus of this game is that the vampire feels very frustrated by his limitations. And some of them you get the very standard answer, like, vulnerability to sunlight. It burns my skin. I hate it. I have to wear a lot of sunblock. I carry a parasol. It's, it's frustrating. And then others just seem to like completely drive him out of his mind. Like the running water limitation. He's like, he can rationalize some of the other ones. Like he rationalizes the thing about crossing thresholds as being a guilt-based thing. When I go in someplace I don't feel welcome, I start feeling guilty about it for some reason, although, I don't know why I feel guilty about that when I don't feel guilty about killing all of those people. But then again, if I start thinking about that, then I start feeling guilty about that. So crossing thresholds, he rationalizes it as a guilt thing. But then the running water thing just drives him nuts because there's no explanation for it at all. And he's those things, it does a really great job of setting those up, and then it plays with all of those things at one point or another throughout the story. So for example, one of the puzzles is you have to there's a leaky pipe and there's water rushing across a sidewalk, and you can't step across it because you can't cross running water. So you have to figure out how to get that leak fixed before you can get across it. So anyway, overall, it's not a super complicated game in terms of puzzles. The puzzles are all pretty simple. The game is listed at 1 hour on the page, and I think I actually completed in significantly less. And I don't think I missed anything huge either. It's a pretty short game for a parser game. And I am a notorious puzzle dunce. I never got stuck once. I didn't have to consult the help. I found it really simple. It's a bit of a breeze, honestly. But in some ways, I felt really good about that because it was mostly about comedy, and so it kept up the comedic timing of it all. Being frustrated in this game wouldn't really quite have felt right. It has a couple of endings that you get to choose from, neither of which is like a mind-blowing change. You just get to decide sort of how the story progresses a little bit at the end. And overall, I just thought this was a really, really nice game. I don't think it's going to light the world on fire in terms of its like narrative design structure or anything like that, but it's got a good joke, and it carries that joke through in a number of creative ways throughout the entire length of the game. So thumbs up for that.
Great.
Oh, I didn't mention the author's name. Excuse me. This was written by Alex Harby. So thank you, Alex Harby. I had a great time with your game. So Laura, I think you have the next game on our list, JJ Schilling's Age of Chaos, or Jason.
Just Jay.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me. We've got a JJ on the show, and I've got it in the brain. Jay Schilling's Edge of Chaos.
Yeah, so it's written by Robb Sherwin and programmed by Mike Sousa. This one was an interesting one because I just had it kind of earmarked because someone at some point said, like, put this on your radar. This is interesting authors. I don't actually remember how it came to us. It probably was a recommendation from a listener. It's a parser, and it is a noir, but it's an interesting take on it because it is got this slacker protagonist who kind of sucks at being a noir protagonist. Like, he's weak, he's pretty fragile, sometimes he stutters, he's not as clever as he thinks he is. He really wants to seem cool and isn't. He's also pretty young, he's in his 20s. So it's the kind of noir where, like, instead of meeting in a bar, he meets at a really, like, gross petting zoo. And he orders like a Pibb, like a Mr. Pibb from the bar. And he's like, I'll treat myself with a Pibb extra. And he has to use the public library to use the computer to do investigations because he presumably is too broke to have a laptop. So it seems like this is one of the games that's pretty divisive. People either clicked with the protagonist or was like, who is this hipster? And I do not like being with this guy. But if you like parentheticals, this has definitely got that noir parenthetical feel. So, for example, he's talking about how he wants to get paid, and he says, Bitcoin is fine. The client winced ever so imperceptibly. In my experience, when asking for payment in Bitcoin, a reaction such as that one is usually because my customers expect me to launch into a nerd rage explanation of why I chose an alternate method of settling bills. I used to do that, so I'm not mad or anything.
Okay.
So that's the kind of, like, something happens and then there's a comment on it, and it might be a Bitcoin joke or it might be a parenthetical about, like, the animal and the iguana and how pretty it is, or it might be a joke about, like, how Facebook makes you, if you get locked out of your account, click on people you know and identify them by name, and how hard that is when you have too many acquaintances. Like, that's the kind of joke in this. It's I would say it's modern, but like a very millennial modern in that sense.
I had a question for you about it, because looking at the description on the page, like I kind of earmarked this as one that I want to play, although I haven't gotten to it yet. But one of the things that stood out at me was the last line of the description is like, "You're a player of the 2020 interactive fiction competition. I'm Jay. Let's straddle the edge." And so it seems like it's directly addressing the player. What's the context for that? Is that part of the game, or is that just something they're doing in the description here?
So there are efforts to make kind of direct allusions to now. For example, there's a part where they say, like, this is normally where we would have a handshake, but because we live now, we all just pretend a handshake happened and walked off.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like super meta, but there are lots of connections to like things that are very, they do mention Facebook. They do mention like the fact that you can't shake hands. It's not like this is a pandemic game, but they make some references to that. I think the most interesting thing about this game, though, is I have made it a habit in IFComp when I'm going in blind to, like, when I'm evaluating games, I open the walkthrough real quick and just scan it for length. So I know how long the puzzles are, how in depth it is, how good the walkthrough is if I need it. This had a pretty short walkthrough, but it was listed 2 hours. So when I went into it, like the first couple of games are actually first couple puzzles are super straightforward, but it has a sense that the game is huge. But if you are just kind of proceeding, I think there's lots of dead ends that you could go down, but if you are just kind of proceeding with your investigation, it feels like it's on rails. But it sounds like a lot of people have had this sense that they have no idea how big the game is going to get, and it starts feeling unruly at a point. It's an odd feeling, because a lot of games have like a fictional feeling of it being too loud, but you feel like you're in a safe spot. This one doesn't have that safety feel, although it is actually really straightforward. But I think that's made it a little bit of an odd duck this year. I also want to give a quick shout out to, they do have one really good puzzle element of the pet machine, which is like an animal babblefish where you can use it to talk to pets. And that is a really great puzzle, in the middle of this. But it seems like I enjoyed this game, but I could definitely see how, like, if you don't like the dialogue early on, just it doesn't change. So like, if you like this character, you'll like the game. But if something in the first 15 minutes has turned you off, like, it's not like it radically changes in 2 hours. I think, Jason, you played some of this, right?
I did start playing it. Yeah, I didn't get very far. It was when I learned you were doing it for the podcast. I started out on it, but yeah, like you, I got the impression that it was a bigger game than it actually was. So I kind of felt like, I don't think I can do this justice in the time available. But actual fact, I found it quite kind of strange game tonally. This the beginning I played. I wasn't sure at the beginning whether perhaps it was because it started out in the petting zoo and there was a bar and there was an eye. But
the bar is only sharing soda, and so you're like, is it in a fictional reality?
Exactly. I wondered whether maybe we were kind of like in a world like do you know the novel Gun with Occasional Music, which is kind of like
my gosh,
like noir with animals in it. And I wondered if we were in something like that kind of world.
I thought the Alcock was the bartender, and I tried to talk to it, and it was like, you can't talk to it.
Yes.
Because the opening says there's this Alcock behind the bar, and I assumed it was the bartender.
Yes, me too.
As one does.
Right.
As one does. And I tried to order a drink from it, and it was like, it just stares at you with its big eyes, and I still thought it was a playable character. I still thought it was an NPC.
How awkward.
Well, this sounds really strange and really interesting. I think sometimes it's these sorts of games that, I mean, like it might end up in that sort of banana of discord spot, but like sometimes those are the most interesting. They've got a very unique thing they're going for, and it's not for everybody. But like, I know Robb, Sherwin, and Mike Sousa are both like heavy hitters. They've made some really great games in the past. So yeah, I want to give this a try. I think it sounds like it might be for me, even though that sounds pretty weird.
Yeah, I think you just need to know more about going in, because I had someone had labeled this as like sci-fi, so I was expecting space and planets and aliens, and I did. That was not the correct label. So, like, the pictures you see at the beginning of the game are also like this desert landscape with a dog and a parrot, and it does pay out a little bit, but it's if you're looking for like a hard sci-fi, this is not it, despite the art on the cover. I think that's part of the like that weird discrepancy people are seeing. Like, the art doesn't line up with the beginning of the game. So just know that going in.
Shane, I think you played a game that I also played a little bit of, but ended up, this is not a reflection on the game. It is a reflection on my state as a new parent. I ended up falling asleep before completing it and haven't gone back to it yet. But you played Electric Word Life, and I'm eager to hear more about it because I've been meaning to go back and finish it, but haven't yet. Tell me about Electric Word Life.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start by saying I absolutely loved this one. I tend to, in the competition, because I like to cover a lot of games, I tend to look for things that are, fairly short, and a lot of those are your more choice-based things. So that is basically the reason I picked this. And on top of that, I was looking for something Halloween-y, and this is definitively a Halloween story. The name Electric Word Life, if you don't recognize it, is a Prince lyric. From the song "Let's Go Crazy." I had to double check that. I was like, I know I've heard this.
Okay, I did not know that, and I was thinking it was a D&D thing.
Oh no! Let's get crazy.
Like Power Word Kill.
Power Word Kill. Exactly.
Look for the purple banana until they put us in the truck. Let's go crazy.
So, and I also I tried to find out if there was any other writing from this author, Lance Nathan, but I didn't spot anything. I just did a cursory quick glance at IFDB and all that. But the concept here is I'll just start with the description. It's 1999, and your roommate has talked you into hosting a Halloween party. It's pretty much going to be all his friends, but you've invited a few of your own who may or may not make it. Here's hoping for the best. And what I'll say about this game is, so far from the competition this year, this is my favorite writing, just straight up writing. The actual story of it is very interesting, and it's tough to really get into without spoiling. So I'll just start by saying like the basics. You're a guy named Perry. Like I said, it's 1999, so it's very retro and it has a lot of nostalgia elements for me there. I was this guy in 1999, like a kind of a nerdy. Well, I wasn't a college student. I was in high school, but I know this experience. And the experience of kind of throwing a Halloween party, but still having a party in your own space, but still kind of feeling like an outsider. That's kind of nice. And then he finds his friends who are kind of theater buddies out sitting on the balcony and just kind of talking with them. How okay are we with spoilers here? Because I don't want to spoil this for people, but
my usual approach here, and Jason, feel free to follow this if you feel you need to spoil anything at some point. We do chapterize these episodes, so in case for some reason you haven't listened to our previous coverage or something like this or missed it, we put in chapter markers on all of the game portions on this. So if we're going to start talking spoilers, we'll just say so. And at that point, if folks don't want to be spoiled on the remainder of the details about Electric Word Life, for example, just use the chapter skip feature on your podcast player and skip to the next chapter.
Okay. So I will get into a little bit of spoilers then. But so the concept here is you're throwing this Halloween party. You are spending time with your friends. And by the way, the friendship aspect of this is that's probably the thing that I think is the best written. It uses that aspect of some of these twine-based games where you have those like little clickable pieces of the paragraph that like unfold into little mini scenes, where you have you don't know as you're navigating around through, clicking whether something's going to take you to a different place or if it's just going to be a reminiscence or if it's just going to be a joke. But it's that lots of hyperlinks within the text that do various different things. It does commit some of that sin of interactive hypertext based fiction of having some timed text. There is one particular piece of timed text, which is the revelation that I was going to save till after the spoiler break, but now I will save here. So your friend Andy has been late or Perry's friend Andy has been late to the party, and when he arrives, you reach out and your hand goes through Andy, and you realize Andy is a ghost and that he has died on the way to the party in a car crash. And the kind of frantic discussion between you and Andy that ensues, where Andy basically just wants to, Andy's a ghost, and it doesn't really make sense. But Andy wants to, at the very least, experience one last night with his friends. And that's the kind of start of the story. So it's very sweet. I won't kind of spoil any more of it. But I really enjoyed the writing of it. I think it's always nice to have like a nice Halloween game to go to, since the comp is at this time of year. And I wish I had covered it in one of the previous episodes, because I could have recommended it as a Halloween experience for people. But now here it is, November. So there you go.
Yeah, is it just ghost tinged, or is it actually spooky, scary at all?
It's not scary. And in fact, there is obviously there's death. The content warning listed here says death/grieving, but no gore or violence. This is not that kind of Halloween story, which is entirely true. So I think
that's autumnal.
Yes, it is. I think it's absolutely lovely. It rises above where I think a lot of your choice-based fiction hits in the contest. It's so far, like I said, my favorite piece of just plain writing in the comp.
Yeah, I can't wait to try and finish this. One of the great frustrations of using, we talk about this every year because it just always comes up. One of the frustrations of using an iPad to play these sorts of games, which is my preferred way to do it because I can sit on the couch and relax and do it. But one frustration is that if you happen to fall asleep halfway through, you have to start it over because, of course, it will refresh your page or something like that. So, but I'm looking forward to taking the time to go back into that because I was really enjoying the writing right up until the point where I lost consciousness. So, Jason, I think you and I both played Entangled. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, so Entangled is a time travel game set in a sort of very social realist kind of realistic setting in like a small American town. I think one of the reviewers described it as being a Rust Belt town.
Yeah.
It's certainly like a town in a place where it's not a place where there's great economic boom. It's a rundown place, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of starts off in a trailer park with the player character looking for a guy called Sam, and then it goes off in a weird direction from there. Very interesting game. What did you think to it?
There's a lot I liked about it, and I definitely had a few issues with it in practice. One of the things that's really interesting about this game is that it's so the setup is that you, through a sort of apparently accident, get sort of catapulted back to the 1980s when the town wasn't quite so run down. And that happens fairly early in the game, but it gives you an opportunity to explore the town a little bit before, in fact, kind of requires you to explore the town a little bit before that happens. So you start at one end of town, you kind of walk across town, interacting with a number of characters. There's a small puzzle you have to solve in order to kind of get the whole way across town. And doing that puzzle requires you to at least do a little bit of exploration, meet a few of the colorful characters that are there. For example, there's a UFO believer guy. There's the lady who tells fortunes. There's bartenders. There's a guy who runs a tattoo parlor, etc. And all of these characters have a little bit of something to them. You then kind of make your way to sort of finding the friend that you are trying to go find at the beginning of the game and get booted back in time to the 1980s. And your first kind of task is to figure out what am I doing in the 1980s? How did I get here? And then you find a time machine that you need to repair in order to get back to your own time. And so the majority of the game is about sort of finding the objects or items you need to fix the time machine in order to get back to your own time. Overall, the big structure of it, though, is that like actions you take in the 1980s could potentially have effects on the sort of ultimate fate of the town in the 2020s.
Back to the Future.
Yeah, one of the problems I had with it was that it wasn't really clear at what point I'd gone back to the 1980s. I only sort of became. I
had that same problem a little bit.
Yeah,
it's very strange. It's like it happens a bit all of a sudden. You get kind of thrown off your feet, and suddenly the bowling alley you're in looks a little different. But so first of all, did you find the notes? There's a bit at the very beginning of the game when there's a scientist that rushes past you and drops some of his notes on the ground, and they're missable.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. They. I think so. Yeah. I found them both times I played it. But the second time I tried to run after the scientist and give them back to him, but that's not possible to do. But you can't read the notes, I think, until after you've gone back into the past. From what and that was what really threw me off, because the notes are what give you an idea of like.
So I knew kind of going into it that this was a time travel game, but the game doesn't really tip its hand that you've traveled in time unless you go back in time and then try to read the notes. But I didn't. Or you find the time machine. But even if you find the time machine, it doesn't just say, hey, I found a time machine. You have to read the notes in order to know what you're looking at. And I didn't reread the notes, because the first time you look at the notes when you're in the present, it just says like, you can't read these. They're full of scientific jargon and you don't understand them.
Yes.
But then when you go back in time, suddenly you can understand the notes, which I found to be a pretty big issue for me, because while I knew that I was playing a time travel game, I kept waiting for the game to have its big reveal of like, I'm in the past. Wow.
Yes.
Right. And that never happens unless you read the notes. And I didn't. Which is weird.
I did read the notes.
Yeah.
I did read the notes, but I still didn't get that moment of, wow, I'm in the past. I noticed, the first thing I noticed was that the diner wasn't there. And I was sort of like, oh, okay, something's changed. But it wasn't it wasn't, I guess, you don't have that sort of obvious visual element like you have in Back to the Future,
right,
where you can see that everything's changed. So reading the descriptions, again, I don't think it was apparent enough that things had changed, and I wonder if there's a way of signaling that would have been a bit clearer.
It's weird. There were definitely things there, but it's funny how like this maybe. I wonder if the fact that you're in a kind of like rundown Rust Belt town kind of masks this a little bit. So, for example, you walk into the bowling alley, and suddenly you're thrown off your feet, and at that point you're in the past, and you look around. And the bowling alley, what it says is like the bowling alley looks cleaner than you expected, and there's an asteroids machine. And I'm like, an asteroids machine could be in a Rust Belt town bowling alley today. Like that's not gonna that's not gonna be like a big, like those are still around, guys. And if I
went to a bowling alley and there wasn't an asteroids machine, I'd say, hey guys, why don't you get some good games up in here?
Yeah. Honestly, if there was an asteroids machine, I'd be like, let me go play that. That's exciting.
Plus, there's a trend for having these old machines back in
exactly.
bowling alleys and places now.
Exactly. So
yeah. 80s tech is all over the game I just played too.
Yeah. There's definitely some issues like that with it, like structure wise. I feel like that could be an easy fix. I a bit felt like I just like missed something, and it wasn't even that like I was confused. Like I understood that this was a time travel story. I think based on the description, I forget. I forget where I heard that it was a time travel story.
It's in the blurb. I think.
Yeah. So I think I kind of knew that. It just sort of felt like I was waiting for a shoe to drop because the game didn't tip its hand. Like I was expecting the sort of big time travel story moment, right? And that didn't quite happen. And you don't get a lot of like, I don't know, inner monologue from the main character or anything like that, where they're thinking about, hey, this is weird or something like that. There are some things I really did like about it. I loved the so first of all, I thought a lot of the characters were pretty fun and interesting. The dialogue trees with them were a little shallower than I would have liked, but some of them had some interesting stuff to say, and I'm pretty sure there were some hidden secrets that I missed in terms of talking to the characters. The game puts a lot of focus on interacting with the characters, and most of the kind of like, if you want to change the future, quote unquote, then most of that happens via interacting with the characters and changing their perspective on their town. And
yeah, it even gives you a score at the end in terms of how much you've interacted.
Yeah, yeah, and the score, I got a kind of a pretty middling, mediocre score. The other thing that it gives you at the end, though, that I thought was really nice and kind of clever was it doesn't just give you a score. It gives you a kind of a like American Graffiti, Where Are They Now kind of like credits roll. Nick the bartender went on to do X and Y, and Jerry the gas station attendant went on to do such and such. And it tells you each of those characters that you've interacted with, like how their story has changed because of your very brief interaction with them in the 80s going into the modern day again. So I like that idea quite a lot, and it kind of would lend itself to additional playthroughs, I think, because it really hints to you that like each of these characters has a story, and each of them has the potential for you to have an impact on them that changes their perspective on the town, and then ultimately changes the town. It just, I don't know, playing through it just the one time. My main focus was just on like, okay, how do I fix the time machine? And it wasn't so much on like, how do I get the gas station attendant not to move away or something like that? You know what I mean? So I think this would have been probably stronger in in a second playthrough. You said you had played through it more than once. Did you find anything like that?
Yeah, I did go and interact with some of the characters I hadn't really bothered to interact with again. But I still wasn't sure really what, one thing I found slightly confusing was that there are characters in there that you can interact with, like the barman and the tattoo artist. I didn't have any money, so I wondered, what happens if I get a tattoo? Well, I can't.
Yeah, so I found $1. There's a bit where you see a dollar bill blowing around and you can chase it down. And so I found $1 and that was like it for me. I could only use that. And I forget what puzzle that came into, but you definitely can't like sit down and get a tattoo or buy art from the art gallery or anything like that. So yeah, kind of weird, but I did find ways to like interact with the characters that would, some stuff plays into the main thrust of like getting parts to fix the time machine, and other stuff doesn't. You can find the scarf that's like a sentimental object for the fortune teller lady or other stuff like that.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that little storyline.
I like that too. Yeah, and it was a little adventure gamey in that like, okay, I need to get her scarf. Somebody's sitting on it in the park, but he won't get up unless I give him a bottle of booze or something like that. So like it was a little adventure gamey, but it still felt nice to like bring a sentimental object to someone and then to see that their life had changed in some small way afterwards because of that. I liked that a lot. And that's the kind of stuff I would like to see more of in this game. And part of that is probably that I didn't get to see stuff that was already in the game, and other stuff might be like, maybe this is, needs to be beefed up a little bit. But like this idea of like these more, I don't know, sentimental interactions with people in the past that kind of change. I would have liked to do more of that, both in terms of like, I should have probably spent more time trying to do that stuff as the optional side stuff. And also like, it would be nice to see more of it, maybe make it more of that on the main path, if that makes sense. But overall, I think it's a pretty solid little game, and I love a time travel story. Anytime I see a time travel story on a page like this, I'm definitely going to click on it. So I'm glad I spent some time with it.
Oh yeah, me too.
It took me about 2 hours to complete, I think. Yeah. How long did it take you?
It took me about an hour, I think. It was very tightly implemented. No, I couldn't find any errors or anything, and no obvious bugs, nothing at all like that. I think it was the author's second game or first game or second game. But yeah, very, very nicely, very slick.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's Entangled by Darkstar. Definitely recommend checking it out. The description calls it a slice of life 2 hours parser game, and I like that description, slice of life. Although it is, when I think slice of life, I kind of envision more sort of cozy rather than like slice of. I think you're calling it like social realism or something like that is very appropriate, because it does sort of feel like it's about the destruction of the American factory town.
It's a more slice of life, like Clifford Odets.
Yeah, sure, something like that. But definitely a cool game. And if you like time travel stories, this in particular is worth checking out. So that's Entangled by Darkstar. Next on our list was the Turnip. And Laura, I think you and Jason both played this one a bit.
Yeah. So Turnip is one of the shortest games in the comp, I think. It's by Joseph Pentangelo. Sorry again if we mangle everybody's name. They're just written, so we guess at pronunciation. It's a surrealist tinged twine game. So I'll read the opening sentence. While you button your shirt, your dog rummages around in the cabinets and settles on a deer haunch. This one is ripened to the perfect midpoint between fresh and rotting. He wolfs it down, hair and gristle and fat and bone. This is very emblematic of the tone of the story. It's kind of this, like, again, it's so short that it's going to, I can't actually talk about what happens because it's going to spoil it, but it's this story about being a worker. You go about your day and you have your dog and you go to work and you find a turnip and you can't stop staring at it. And there's something off about it. And every time you click on a link in this game, there's a 50-50 chance that you're going to see something that's just a straightforward description of an object or something weird. Or a third thing is like an extremely elaborate backstory for a side character, and you have no idea what's behind that link.
Yeah.
It's a short story concept, so it's really linear, but really the interactivity is looking at things, deciding how invested you're going to get in this turnip you've decided to take home for the day, and you're getting kind of obsessed with. To me, it's got that, again, it's that kind of subtly creepy. Like, there's no creepiness really happening. Like, it's not like the turnip is going to bite you.
Just slightly odd, isn't it? Just something slightly off kilter about it.
Yeah.
The author actually wrote has put two games into this comp. The other one was the Pine Cone, and they're both very, very short. And normally on
the Pine Cone, that's the one with the goat. Oh, that's the
same author.
Okay. I think I'm onto your tone here then.
Yeah. So I think what's happened is he's adapted short stories he's written into and made them interactive. And I think the Pine Cone is more interactive than the Turnip. The Pine Cone I think has several different endings, and the Turnip is much more linear. I don't know which one he did first. And normally on the IF forum and stuff, I'm always going on about how things need to be interactive, things need to have, I'm very much in favor of branching narrative and stuff. But I think because these are so short, I don't really have a problem with them being linear.
Same here.
Yeah, I just enjoyed the experience, brief as it was.
Well,
and
the interaction feels like obsession, because a lot of the interaction is looking at things more closely or staring at your turnip. And
Yes.
The fact that you can click on the word turnip and get like another description of the same thing you've just been carrying around the game.
Yes.
And it's a slightly different description. And you're like, it feels like the interaction is getting more obsessed. Even though it's completely linear, it just feels like you're opting into I don't even want to say madness. Like, Cthulhu does not emerge at the end of this game. It's not that kind of game, but it feels like the kind of one where you don't know if it will.
They're not in any way kind of wacky. They're just humorous. They remind me a little bit of Donald Barthelme, the writer. That kind of slightly odd tone.
I was feeling like a less folky Over the Garden Wall feel too for people who are animation fans, just because it's got that like the twinge of something off. It's a little off kilter. And I will say one thing, the ending of this game feels like there should be multiple endings, but there's not. There's only one ending to this one. It does feel like you might have done something to cause the ending. It's got a really like strong feel that you've chosen somehow something that caused the ending.
Yes.
And you feel like you might be able to play it again and cause something else to happen, but that is not the case. Just, I don't know if I don't think that constitutes a spoiler. I just don't want people to feel like they have to replay it to get a different ending. But I do think like the tone of this is very deliberate.
Oh yeah.
This is definitely a short story that was written and the word choice is very exact. And I think since it's so short, it feels like a very complete experience for something that's like, 5-6 minutes tops. It's extremely short.
Well, that's really cool. And I'm always interested, when you see somebody enter multiple games in the comp, like they tend to be these sort of very short experiences, but like, I don't know. I'm always sort of interested to play multiple games by the same person and get that sort of different perspectives. Like what made them choose that they had to enter 2 this year, that sort of thing.
Yeah. This is the type of game that I have a really hard trouble rating in IFComp because it's not, like the scale is small and tight and the writing is deliberate and it's straightforward. So there's all these complicating factors.
Yeah. Like how does a game that's like really, really a shined but incredibly tiny thing versus something that's like maybe a little less polished or but brilliant, but like significantly larger and more complicated and more of an achievement.
A 15-minute game that has everything perfect and is very interactive, I'll be like, yeah, I'll give this a 10. But if it's linear and it's short, like, I don't know, it just becomes tough to grade. This is one of the ones that I'm going to like think about more and like percolate on what I want to rate it at the end of the comp. It's definitely one of the ones that I tend to grade some comp entries against each other. So I feel like this is going to be one of the ones that I'm constantly moving up and down my ranking as we go.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to see what the author does next, because I think having now sort of gone down this route and whether he can embrace the interactivity more and give us something a bit more heft. I was looking forward to see what he comes up with.
Because his ear seems really good. And his rhythm is great. And I think he has a good sense of pacing. I just want more interactivity.
Yeah, and I love that sort of surreality too. Like that's the sort of thing that works really well in IF, creating this surreal world that has some level of internal consistency and then letting you play in that world with some interactivity. I love that kind of thing. So I'd love to see more from this guy. Shane, I think the last game on our list for today is one that you played.
Yes.
It's Vain Empires.
Yeah, Vain Empires is a collaboration between this author already came up in our discussion because we mentioned the Owl Consults. It's Thomas Mack who's the creator of that game. So the Owl Consults was a really fun concept. It is a former supervillain kind of consulting with supervillains over the phone. And I can't remember. I think it was like a year or two ago. And this is also a similarly interesting concept. But the person that Thomas Mack is collaborating with here, I probably am mispronouncing this made-up name, Xavid, Xavid.
Oh, okay. I played other games from them, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Xavid also has another game in the comp this year, Seasonal Apocalypse Disorder, I think is the name of it. So first off, I want to just say about the implementation of this game, which is it's parser based and it is top notch. I am, although I am a lifelong lover of interactive fiction and parser based games, I do frequently find myself having to draw a map. So I always very much appreciate when a game incorporates a visual map, and this one does so. It has one of the kind of better implementations of a visual map that I've seen before. And on top of that, it also provides a kind of a more labeled map as a download. So first off, A+ for accessibility. And on top of that, they've implemented excellent Invisiclues style hints and so on. So I think it's a very, very accessible game with a bit of light puzzle and light comedy and as is always fun, espionage. So the concept for the game is you are a demon and you are also a spy and you are infiltrating a casino to retrieve various different I can't remember the term they use. These various, there's some MacGuffins that you have to get. Codexes with codes in them or something like that. And the fun thing about it is, I always enjoy when a piece of IF gives you interesting limitations on the ways that you can kind of interact with the world around you. And in this one, the limitation is you can't really touch anything because you are an incorporeal being, but you can look at people and take intents out of their heads and put them into the heads of other people.
Huh.
And so all of the puzzle, it really kind of is just a lock and key style kind of puzzle, where you're kind of walking around and finding out who has what intents and then trying to figure out where they go. But there's a lot of people in this casino. And I think that puzzle aspect is quite well designed, because the intents that don't really do anything fail obviously and quickly. And the other intents, and some of the intents are very, very useful and are like clearly used over and over again for puzzle purposes, like, the ones that will get people to like look around or explore or pick up things or, play table games with each other or things like that. And so I think, I don't want to get too much into any of the like individual puzzles, although I thought the puzzles were good. And I liked the way that they were implemented, and it's kind of a fun verb set to be able to, it kind of feels like an interesting twist on parsers, where you're almost collecting the verbs as you go, like out of people's heads and then using them in other people's heads. And then I also just sort of liked some of the humorous writing around it, because you are this sort of weird incorporeal demon. And I saved a little clipping of the writing here, because at first it starts to feel like it's playing out like a very straightforward puzzle game, like, but instead of get lamp, it's, get play from head of bouncer or whatever. But it starts to kind of take pains to explain to you that for you, the dummy human, it is trying to dumb down what's actually happening here. So there's a bit here that says, it occurs to me I should clarify what I'm glossing as moving from place to place is actually a complicated warping of my spiritual probability field, to move the mean of the distribution to another point in space while preserving the decay rate of the tails. I'm told that humans use muscles and tendons for their locomotion, and I suppose that works too. Most of my experience, however, is completely alien to humans' frame of reference, and I'm trying to meet you halfway. If I mention, say, that I have a headache, I don't mean to imply that I have a literal head that literally hurts. I'm referring to some part of my non-human, non-physical, non-anatomy that would make absolutely no sense to you. So I've put it in terms of the closest human equivalent. Similarly, I can't pick up or even hold a spiritual object such as an intention. I don't have hands, or despite the unflattering paintings you may have seen, horns and a tail. Instead, I keep something like that nearby. I'm doing something impossibly complex that nevertheless has the same effect as you're holding a teacup with your grubby, meaty human hands. To avoid confusion, I'm just going to describe myself as, say, holding the communique, and I'll leave it to you to wonder about how a spiritual being such as myself navigates the physical realm. That having been said, I do wonder how you manage with only 5 basic senses, and not particularly well-developed ones at that. Birds can see more colors than you, and they even get to fly. I don't think humans are very good at flying, although I have confirmed they are great at falling, which strikes me as a major design flaw. If you're stuck in only 3 spatial dimensions, you might as well get the most out of them. So
that's great. I love that.
So it has this sort of kind of interesting, and I rarely kind of call this element of games out, but it has a absolutely lovely piece of album art in the comp, which features a angel riding a gigantic bomb down onto the surface of the earth. It's a great little piece of art. So I enjoyed this one a good deal. I think it's very, if you're looking for something that's a little bit of a twist on more or less traditional structures, or if you are trying to introduce someone to parser IF, I think this is also a good use of that kind of time.
Nice.
Definitely one that I'm high on my list to play next.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really glad we got a chance to talk about all of these games. I'm really enjoying this comp this year. And I know we've talked about a lot of other games in our previous coverage. We've got a lot of more games coming up. Jason, because you've got to leave us, we can't have you for next episode, I guess. If you wondered if you might have any games that you want to particularly call out that we haven't talked about today from the comp that you think are worth checking out, either ones that we've already covered or haven't gotten to yet and should.
Well, I'd like to give a shout out to the 3 games that I beta tested. One of which is the Magpie Takes the Train, which you've already covered. The other one is Stuff of Legend by Lance Campbell, which is a very fun little parser game, a comedy parser game about he's a village idiot who decides to become a knight.
Ooh.
Yes, that's a really fun one. And another one I beta tested was The Cursed Pickle of Shireton, which is a sort of parody of an RPG from the 90s, I think, is the premise of that one.
I had that one on my short list, and I think that's going to be one that will probably benefit from more people playing it, since I have played games by that author before, but I'm not as well versed in that era of RPGs as some of my other podcast co-hosts.
All right, I'll make a point of giving that one a shot before we reconvene. So, Jason, thank you again so much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure having you, and feel free to hope to have you back again soon.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, thanks. So listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Short Game. This show is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. So if you want to support the show, you can head to patreon.com/theshortgame. And every supporter we have on Patreon at even $1 a month or more gets immediate access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the games that we are playing. The conversations that happen there become the conversations that happen on this show. So if you want to talk to us, suggest IFComp games, talk to us about interactive fiction, or talk to us about anything else game related, or really whatever else is going on with you, then join us there. We'd be happy to have you. You can also find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame.net. That's where you'll find our contact form if you want to send us an email. We've got a searchable show notes page there where you can search back through everything we've ever covered in the 5+ years we've been a podcast. And you can also find our show on Twitter @_shortgame, where we tweet about the stuff that we're playing. We also are all on Twitter individually. I'm at Reagan K. That's RAYGANK. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me at Lauren J. Nash.
Shane, where can people find you?
Also on Twitter at 8bitshane.
And Jason, where can people find you and all of your work?
Well, you can either look on the IFDB and look up my name, JJ Guest, or you can go to jjguest.blogspot.com and you'll find links to all of my games on there.
Thank you. And I definitely recommend people do that, and especially 2018 winner Alias the Magpie, which is just a real high watermark for the comps. So definitely recommend people check that out if you didn't play in 2018. And listeners, once again, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.